Don't be dramatic, Margaret. Ethan is gone. Pack your bags and learn to survive on your own. My daughter-in-law said those words while the mashed potatoes were still warm on the table from my son's funeral dinner. I remember staring at the steam rising from Ethan's favorite casserole while the entire room went silent around me. The dining room suddenly felt too bright, too cold, too empty. Just 6 hours earlier, I had stood beside my son's grave under a grey November sky while freezing wind swept across the cemetery. Now I was sitting in the house Ethan had bought 3 years ago, listening to his widow speak to me like I was some unwanted stranger who had overstayed her welcome. Claire folded her napkin carefully and placed it beside her untouched wine glass. She didn't look angry. That was the part that hurt the most. Her voice was calm, polite, even. Like she was discussing grocery lists instead of throwing a 72-year-old woman out of her dead son's home. I think it's healthier if we both move on quickly, she added, brushing invisible crumbs from her black dress. Dragging this out won't help anybody heal. I looked toward the kitchen doorway where Ethan used to lean every Sunday morning with a cup of coffee in his hand, teasing me about using too much cinnamon in my pancakes. For a second, I could almost hear his laugh echoing through the quiet house. But all I heard now was the soft ticking of the wall clock and Claire scrolling through her phone beneath the table. I buried my son today, I whispered. My throat burned with exhaustion. Claire sighed heavily, like I was making things inconvenient for her. And I lost my husband, she replied. But life keeps moving, Margaret. Life keeps moving. The words settled over me like cold rain. I glanced around the dining room. Ethan's framed college diploma still hung beside the staircase. His coat was still draped over the chair near the front door. The house still smelled faintly like cedarwood and coffee, the scent he always carried with him after long days at work. Yet somehow, less than a day after his funeral, I already felt erased from it all. Claire stood up first. I already contacted a realtor this afternoon, she said casually. The market's strong right now, and honestly, this house is too large for one person. One person. Not us. Not family. Just her. I nodded slowly because I no longer trusted my voice. If I opened my mouth again, I was afraid the grief sitting inside my chest would spill across the entire table. Claire disappeared upstairs moments later, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floors Ethan had installed himself one summer. I remained alone in the dining room long after the food turned cold. My hands rested in my lap while the grandfather clock in the hallway marked each passing minute. Finally, sometime after midnight, I climbed the stairs toward Ethan's bedroom. The hallway light was still on. Claire must have forgotten to turn it off. Ethan's room looked exactly the way he left it before his final hospital visit. His reading glasses sat beside the bed. A half-finished book rested on the nightstand. His navy sweater was folded neatly over the chair near the window. I pressed my hand against the fabric and closed my eyes. It still smelled like him. That was when I noticed something strange. On Ethan's desk, beside his old laptop, his phone was plugged into the charger. The screen suddenly lit up against the darkness of the room. A notification appeared across the display. Scheduled message, deliver tomorrow at 9 a.m. My heart stopped for a moment as I stared at the glowing screen in silence. I barely slept that night. I sat in Ethan's bedroom chair with his phone resting in my hands while the digital clock beside his bed crept toward morning. Outside the window, icy rain tapped softly against the glass, and somewhere downstairs the refrigerator hummed in the silence. At exactly 9 o'clock, the phone vibrated once. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the screen. There was a scheduled video message waiting for me. Ethan's face appeared the moment I pressed play. He was sitting in his office wearing the dark green sweater I bought him last Christmas. For one terrible second, seeing him alive again knocked the air from my lungs. "Mom," he said quietly, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was nervous. "If you are watching this, something went wrong faster than I expected." I pressed my hand over my mouth. His voice sounded tired. Not sick. Just disappointed somehow. "I need you to listen carefully," he continued. "Do not trust Claire with anything involving the house, my accounts, or my paperwork. Especially the paperwork. My heartbeat slowed into a cold, heavy dread. Ethan glanced toward the office door before speaking again. There are things I should have handled sooner. I thought I had more time. The video ended abruptly after 37 seconds. That was all. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. I stared at the black screen for a long time before I finally stood up. Downstairs, I could already hear movement in the kitchen. Cabinet doors opening. Coffee brewing. Claire beginning her morning like any other Tuesday. I slipped Ethan's phone into the pocket of my cardigan before walking downstairs. The smell of expensive perfume hit me before I even reached the bottom step. Claire stood at the counter in cream-colored workout clothes instead of morning black. Her blonde hair was pulled into a neat ponytail. She looked refreshed. Rested. Almost relieved. "You are up early," she said without looking at me. "I have movers coming later to start organizing Ethan's office." Organizing. Such a gentle word for erasing someone. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the machine Ethan bought 2 winters ago after claiming my instant coffee tasted like burnt cardboard. The mug shook slightly in my hands. Claire finally turned toward me. "I also changed the security code last night," she added casually. "Just for safety." Safety. Another soft word hiding something sharp underneath. I nodded once and carried my coffee toward the dining room. That was when I noticed the wall beside the staircase. The framed family portrait from Ethan's 40th birthday was gone. The silver frame had rested there for years. Now only a pale rectangle remained against the paint where sunlight had not touched the wall. I stopped walking. "Where is the picture?" I asked quietly. Claire opened the refrigerator. "Which one?" "The family portrait." She shrugged without concern. "Oh. I packed some old decorations already." The house was starting to feel cluttered. Decorations. I looked at her standing there in Ethan's kitchen, speaking about our memories like they belonged in storage bins. Then the front doorbell rang. Claire glanced toward the hallway and smiled for the first time all morning. "Perfect timing," she said. Through the front window, I saw a man in a navy overcoat standing beside a white SUV with a real estate company logo printed across the side door. Claire smoothed her ponytail before opening the front door wide. "Thank you so much for coming, Richard," she said brightly. "I think this property is going to move very quickly." I stood frozen near the dining room table while cold rain slid down the windows behind me. Upstairs, Ethan's bedroom door remained slightly open. And inside my sweater pocket, his phone vibrated one more time. The phone vibrated so softly against my sweater that Claire did not notice it over the sound of the realtor talking about square footage and resale value near the front entrance. I kept my eyes lowered as I slipped away from the dining room and walked quietly toward the downstairs bathroom. Once the door was locked behind me, I pulled Ethan's phone from my pocket. Another scheduled message had arrived. This one contained only an address, a 6-digit access code, and a single sentence underneath. "Mom, do not tell Claire about the storage unit." I stared at the screen while my reflection trembled faintly in the bathroom mirror. Storage unit. Ethan hated renting storage spaces. He used to joke that people only paid monthly fees to avoid throwing away junk they should have dealt with years ago. If he rented one secretly, it meant whatever was inside mattered enough to hide. I copied the address onto a folded tissue and slipped it into my purse just before someone knocked lightly on the bathroom door. "Margaret," Claire called out sweetly. "Richard would love to see the upstairs layout before he leaves." Her voice sounded so warm now. So polished. The kind of voice women use at country clubs and charity luncheons. I opened the door slowly. Claire stood there with perfect posture and a careful smile that never reached her eyes. "You doing all right?" she asked softly. I nodded once. "Just tired." "Of course," she replied quickly, touching my elbow for barely a second. "This has been hard on everybody." Everybody. Another careful word. I followed her upstairs while the realtor complimented the crown molding Ethan spent months restoring by hand. "Homes with character sell quickly in this neighborhood," Richard said while glancing around the hallway. Claire smiled proudly like she had built every inch of it herself. As we passed Ethan's office, I noticed the filing cabinet drawers hanging slightly open. My stomach tightened immediately. Claire caught me looking. I started organizing paperwork this morning, she explained before I even asked. There were stacks everywhere. I stepped into the office after they continued down the hallway. Ethan's desk looked wrong somehow. Too clean. Too empty. His leather notebook was gone. So was the framed fishing photo from our trip to Lake Tahoe 10 years ago. Even the brass compass I gave him after his promotion had disappeared from the bookshelf. I opened one drawer slowly. Empty. Another. Empty again. The third drawer still contained a few loose paperclips and a receipt from a hardware store dated 3 months earlier. Ethan never kept empty drawers. Never. He saved everything. Receipts. Birthday cards. Instruction manuals. I suddenly remembered something he once told me while assembling a kitchen table years ago. People reveal themselves when money gets involved, Mom. At the time, he had laughed after saying it. But standing there in his half-cleared office, the memory no longer felt casual. Downstairs, I heard Claire laughing softly at something Richard said. I looked toward the office closet and noticed a dark green duffel bag tucked behind several boxes. It was Ethan's old gym bag from college. The zipper was half open. Inside sat a small silver key attached to a white tag labeled Unit 214. My pulse quickened instantly. Before I could think twice, I slipped the key into my cardigan pocket just as footsteps approached the office doorway. Claire appeared holding 2 coffee mugs. I thought you might want some. Fresh coffee, she said pleasantly, but her eyes moved immediately toward the closet behind me. For the first time since Ethan's funeral, I saw something flicker across her face that did not look calm. It looked nervous. Claire stood there holding the coffee mugs with both hands, but her attention stayed fixed on the closet behind me. It only lasted a second. Maybe less. A tiny crack in her composure. Then the polite smile returned to her face like nothing had happened. You should try to rest today, she said gently. You look exhausted. I accepted the mug without answering. The coffee smelled bitter and overbrewed. Ethan always measured the grounds carefully because he said weak coffee was a sign people had given up on life. The memory nearly made me smile. Nearly. Claire leaned against the office doorway while Richard continued talking downstairs on his phone. I know this adjustment is difficult, she continued softly, lowering her voice like she was speaking to a fragile patient. But staying here long-term is probably not healthy for either of us. Healthy. Another careful word wrapped around something cruel. I watched steam rise from the coffee between my hands. Ethan never mentioned selling the house, I said quietly. Claire crossed one leg over the other. People say many things before they pass away. Something inside me went still after she said that. Not angry. Not emotional. Just still. Because Ethan had said many things before he died. And now his phone was speaking louder than anyone in this house. Claire glanced again toward the closet before forcing another smile. I already started sorting his paperwork this morning. There was a lot of financial clutter. Financial clutter. Ethan handled million-dollar construction contracts for 20 years. He color-coded tax documents. He backed up family photos onto 3 separate hard drives every Christmas. The idea of Ethan leaving clutter behind felt absurd. Claire stepped closer and lowered her voice further. Honestly, Margaret, some things are better handled quickly. Dragging through every old document only keeps people stuck in grief. There it was. The first real push beneath the kindness. I finally looked directly at her. Her mascara was perfect. Her hair looked freshly styled. Not one sign of sleeplessness under her eyes. She looked like someone preparing for a business meeting, not a widow 2 days after burying her husband. You seem very organized for someone grieving, I said softly. For the first time, her smile tightened slightly. Only slightly. People cope differently. We stared at each other in silence until Richard called from downstairs that he was leaving. Claire immediately brightened again. Coming, she answered sweetly before turning back to me. Try not to overthink things today. Stress is not good at your age. After she walked downstairs, I remained alone inside Ethan's office. The rain outside had finally stopped, leaving pale winter sunlight across the carpet near the desk. I slowly reached into my cardigan pocket and wrapped my fingers around the small silver key. Unit 214. I kept hearing Ethan's voice from the video message. Do not trust Claire. Especially the paperwork. Downstairs, the front door closed. Moments later I heard Claire's SUV engine start in the driveway. I moved quickly toward the bedroom window overlooking the street. Claire's black Range Rover disappeared around the corner within seconds. The house became quiet again. Too quiet. I returned to Ethan's office and opened the closet fully this time. Several cardboard boxes sat stacked beside old winter coats. One box had been knocked slightly sideways. Inside were old family photo albums and a faded blue blanket Ethan carried everywhere as a child. Underneath the blanket rested a yellow envelope with my name written across the front in Ethan's handwriting. My chest tightened instantly. I sat down slowly in his desk chair before opening it. Inside was a single handwritten note. Mom, if Claire starts rushing you out of the house, go to the storage unit before speaking to anyone else. You deserve to know the truth before she controls the story. I waited until nearly noon before leaving the house. Claire texted once to say she would be meeting with attorneys and would not return until evening. The message ended with a smiling emoji that made my stomach turn. Colder than the winter air outside. I drove Ethan's old Ford Explorer because Claire had already started referring to my car as part of the estate. Even her language had changed overnight. Nothing belonged to family anymore. Everything belonged to paperwork. The storage facility sat 20 minutes outside town beside a highway lined with frozen fields and gas stations. Grey clouds hung low across the sky, and patches of dirty snow still clung to the roadside from last week's storm. The building itself looked ordinary. Beige walls. Security cameras above the gate. Rows of metal doors stretching endlessly beneath fluorescent lights. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. My son had hidden pieces of his life inside a place that smelled like dust and cold concrete. Unit 214 was near the back corner. My hands shook as I slid the silver key into the lock. For a moment, I just stood there listening to the distant hum of traffic beyond the walls. Then I pulled the door open. Inside sat only a few items. A folding table. 3 sealed banker boxes. A small fireproof safe. And Ethan's leather office chair positioned strangely in the middle of the room like he had once sat there thinking through something complicated. I stepped inside slowly. The air smelled faintly like cedarwood and printer paper. On top of the nearest box rested another envelope with my name written across the front. This time the handwriting looked rushed. Uneven. I opened it immediately. Mom, if you found this, then Claire moved faster than I hoped. I am sorry. My chest tightened painfully. I lowered myself into the office chair before continuing. There are financial records in these boxes that explain everything. I did not want you learning the truth after I was gone from someone trying to protect themselves. Protect themselves. I looked around the tiny storage unit while cold fear settled quietly into my stomach. Ethan had known something was coming. Maybe not his death. But something. I opened the first banker box carefully. Inside were folders organized by month and year. Bank statements. Property records. Wire transfer receipts. Several pages had yellow sticky notes attached in Ethan's handwriting. One transfer for $80,000 was circled heavily in red ink beside a note that simply read, unauthorized. Another document showed Claire opening a separate investment account 6 months earlier without Ethan's knowledge. I sat frozen while page after page slowly rearranged the version of my family I thought I understood. Then I noticed another folder labeled Private Investigator Reports. My fingers stopped moving for a second. Ethan had hired someone to investigate his own wife. I opened the folder slowly. Most of the reports focused on financial activity. Hidden accounts. Large unexplained withdrawals. Meetings with real estate brokers. But near the back sat several printed photographs taken outside restaurants and hotels in nearby cities. Claire appeared in every picture beside the same man. Tall. Dark overcoat. Silver watch. Sometimes they were seated close together during dinner. Sometimes entering office buildings. One photo showed him touching her lower back while guiding her through a parking garage. Nothing explicit. Nothing scandalous enough for tabloids. But intimate enough that my hands went cold holding the papers. At the bottom of the final page, the investigator had typed one sentence. Client appeared emotionally distressed upon reviewing evidence and requested immediate legal consultation. Ethan had known. Maybe not everything. But enough. Suddenly my phone rang loudly inside the silent storage unit, making me jump in the chair. Claire's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice sounded sweet again. Too sweet. Margaret, she said warmly, I stopped by the house and noticed your room was empty. Where exactly did you go? I looked down at the investigator photographs spread across my lap while Claire waited for an answer on the phone. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed softly inside the storage unit. Somewhere outside, a truck rumbled past on the highway. Everything suddenly felt very far away from the life I thought I knew. I needed some air, I said calmly. Claire laughed lightly, but the sound carried tension underneath it now. Well, I wish you would have told me. I was worried. The woman who tried to remove me from my dead son's home less than 24 hours earlier was suddenly worried about me. I folded the papers carefully back into the folder before speaking again. I am 72 years old, Claire. I think I can still leave the house without permission. Silence stretched between us for half a second. Then her warm tone returned. Of course. I just think this is a sensitive time emotionally. You have been through a lot. I closed my eyes briefly. Ethan was right. She operated inside language the way some people operate inside fog. Everything sounded soft until you realized you could no longer see clearly. I will be home later, I replied quietly. Do not rush, she answered quickly. I actually invited a few people over tonight for a small memorial gathering. Just close friends and business associates. Ethan would have wanted people together. Business associates. 2 days after his funeral. I said nothing. Claire lowered her voice slightly before adding, and Margaret, if you happen to find any financial paperwork while going through Ethan's things, please leave it untouched until the attorneys organize everything properly. There it was again. The paperwork. She ended the call moments later with another gentle goodbye that sounded almost caring if someone did not listen carefully enough. I sat motionless after the line disconnected. Then I looked back down at the evidence spread across the folding table. Unauthorized transfers. Hidden accounts. Real estate meetings. Private investigator reports. My son had spent the final months of his life quietly collecting proof while smiling through family dinners and holiday photographs. The realization broke something inside me that grief alone had not touched yet. Ethan died carrying this fear alone. I opened the fireproof safe next. Inside rested several flash drives, a sealed envelope addressed to attorney Daniel Reeves, and a small velvet jewelry box. My hands paused over the box for a moment before opening it. Inside sat my wedding ring. The original gold band Harold gave me 50 years ago before his arthritis forced him to replace it with a larger one. I had lost this ring nearly a year earlier and assumed it disappeared during a kitchen remodel. Tucked beneath it was another note in Ethan's handwriting. Mom, Claire took this from your dresser last spring. I found it in her jewelry case. I wanted to return it sooner, but I needed you to trust me when the time came. Tears finally burned my eyes then. Not loud tears. Not dramatic ones. Just quiet grief slipping down my face inside a cold storage unit while fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Ethan had been protecting me while I thought he was simply busy with work and married life. Every missing item. Every strange moment. Every uneasy silence at family dinners suddenly rearranged itself into something darker. I slipped the wedding ring onto my finger slowly. It still fit perfectly. Then I noticed another flash drive labeled simply, "If she throws you out." My stomach tightened again. Before I could pick it up, my phone buzzed with a new text message from Claire. Please come home before 7. The guests are important. Attached beneath the message was a photograph of my packed suitcases sitting beside the front door. I arrived back at the house just before sunset. The sky above the neighborhood had turned pale blue and silver, and Christmas lights glowed softly across nearby porches even though Thanksgiving was only a week away. Everything looked painfully normal. Families carrying groceries. Children riding bicycles down the sidewalk. A golden retriever barking somewhere across the street. Meanwhile, my entire life had quietly split apart inside a storage unit 20 miles away. Claire's black SUV already sat in the driveway beside two unfamiliar luxury sedans. Through the front windows, I could see warm light spilling across the living room along with moving shadows and wine glasses raised in conversation. The memorial gathering had already started. My suitcases remained exactly where Claire left them beside the front door. Neatly stacked. Ready to disappear. I stood there for several seconds staring at them while cold evening wind moved through the trees overhead. Then I picked up my purse and walked inside. The smell of catered food and expensive candles hit me immediately. Soft jazz music played through the house speakers Ethan installed himself last year. Claire stood near the fireplace wearing a cream sweater dress and pearl earrings while laughing gently beside three guests I recognized from Ethan's business circle. She looked elegant. Composed. Like a woman rebuilding after tragedy. The moment she saw me enter, her expression shifted into perfect sympathy. "Margaret," she said warmly, crossing the room toward me. "Everyone has been asking about you." She kissed the air beside my cheek without touching me. Her perfume smelled floral and sharp. "You remember Michael and Susan from Ethan's firm?" she asked brightly. Michael shook my hand awkwardly while Susan offered a sad smile. "We were so sorry to hear about Ethan," Susan said softly. I thanked her quietly while my eyes drifted toward the dining room. Ethan's favorite oil painting had vanished from the wall. In its place stood a tall decorative mirror I had never seen before. The house was changing by the hour now. Claire touched my elbow gently. "I moved your things downstairs to make packing easier tomorrow," she whispered with practiced concern. Tomorrow. She had already decided my future without even asking where I planned to go. "That was thoughtful," I replied calmly. Something uncertain flickered behind her eyes after hearing my tone. Perhaps she expected tears by now. Or pleading. Instead, I walked toward the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water while guests quietly discussed property taxes and investment markets around me. Ethan's death had already become background music to networking conversations. Near the kitchen island stood a tall man wearing a charcoal overcoat and silver watch. The same man from the investigator photographs. My pulse slowed instantly. He was real. Not suspicion. Not theory. Real. Claire noticed where I was looking and moved quickly across the room. "Margaret, this is Nathan Cole," she said smoothly. "He has been helping me organize some estate matters." Nathan extended his hand confidently. "I am very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Holloway." His voice sounded polished and careful, like someone used to closing expensive deals. "Over private dinners." I shook his hand once. His watch caught the kitchen light exactly the same way it had in the surveillance photographs. "Have we met before?" I asked quietly. Claire answered too quickly. "No. Nathan works with several financial firms in the area." Nathan smiled politely, but something tightened in his jaw for a split second. Small things become obvious once grief stops blinding you. The room suddenly felt too warm, too staged, too rehearsed. Then my phone vibrated inside my purse. Another scheduled message from Ethan had arrived. I stepped away from the guests and opened it beneath the hallway light. Only one sentence appeared on the screen this time. "If Nathan Cole is inside my house, call Daniel Reeves immediately." I stood alone in the hallway staring at Ethan's message while laughter drifted softly from the living room behind me. "If Nathan Cole is inside my house, call Daniel Reeves immediately." My fingers tightened around the phone. Ethan had not written our house. He wrote my house. The detail settled heavily in my chest. Somewhere deep down, my son already knew how this would end. I slipped quietly into the downstairs study and closed the door behind me. The room smelled faintly like old books and cedar polish. Ethan used to spend late evenings in here reviewing blueprints while baseball games played softly on television. Now the desk sat perfectly clean except for a crystal bowl Claire recently added as decoration. Even grief had been staged inside this house. I searched Ethan's phone contacts until I found Daniel Reeves. The call connected after 2 rings. Mr. Reeves speaking. His voice sounded older than I expected. Calm. Careful. My name is Margaret Holloway, I said quietly. Silence followed for 1 long second. Then his tone changed immediately. Mrs. Holloway, he replied. I have been expecting your call. Cold moved through my arms. You knew Ethan was trying to contact me? I asked. Your son prepared several legal protections before his passing, Daniel answered carefully. But he instructed me not to interfere unless certain conditions were triggered. I looked through the study window toward the living room where Claire stood beside Nathan smiling for guests. Nathan Cole is here tonight, I whispered. The line went completely silent. Then Daniel exhaled slowly. Mrs. Holloway, listen to me very carefully. Do not sign anything your daughter-in-law gives you. Do not leave that property voluntarily. And most importantly, do not let Claire know what you have discovered. My heartbeat quickened. What exactly did Ethan know? Another pause. Enough to become very concerned about his financial exposure, Daniel replied cautiously. Lawyer language. Controlled. Precise. But underneath it sat something much darker. I lowered my voice further. I found investigator reports in a storage unit. Daniel sighed quietly. Then you already understand more than Ethan hoped you ever would. Before I could ask another question, the study door suddenly opened behind me. Claire stood there holding a wine glass with the same polished smile she wore all evening. There you are, she said lightly. Everyone was wondering where you disappeared to. I ended the call immediately and slipped the phone into my pocket. Claire's eyes flickered briefly toward my hands before returning to my face. Private call, she asked sweetly. An old church friend, I replied calmly. She nodded once but did not fully believe me. I could see it now. The tiny calculations behind her eyes. The constant measuring. Claire stepped into the room and closed the door softly behind her. I know this transition has been emotional, she began gently, but tomorrow I really do need you to finalize your moving arrangements. I looked at her quietly. You seem eager. Her expression remained smooth. I am trying to move forward. Ethan would not want this house filled with tension. Ethan. She said his name like a public relations statement now. Carefully rehearsed. Did Ethan know Nathan well? I asked suddenly. The question landed harder than I expected. Claire blinked once before recovering. They crossed paths professionally. Interesting, I replied softly. Because Nathan seems very comfortable here. Something cold passed through her face then disappeared almost instantly. You are tired, Margaret, she said with a tight smile. Grief can create misunderstandings. Then she reached into her purse and removed a thin stack of papers clipped neatly together. Speaking of misunderstandings, these are temporary relocation agreements. Just practical details while the estate gets organized. She held the papers toward me with manicured fingers. At the top of the first page, I saw the words voluntary property vacation form. I looked down at the relocation papers while Claire waited patiently beside the study door. The entire room felt strangely quiet despite the voices and music continuing downstairs. Voluntary property vacation form. Even the title sounded cold. Professional. Prepared long before tonight. I slowly turned the first page while Claire crossed her arms lightly. It is only temporary, she said in the same calm voice she used with funeral guests and realtors. The attorneys recommended simplifying things during probate. Probate. Another clean word hiding ugly intentions underneath it. I kept reading silently. According to the document, I would surrender all residential access to the property immediately and acknowledge Claire as sole acting authority over Ethan's estate assets until legal review concluded. Ethan's estate assets. My eyes stopped on that phrase. Then something clicked quietly inside my mind. Ethan never referred to the house as an asset. He called it home. You already had these prepared before tonight, I said softly. Claire tilted her head slightly. I am trying to stay organized. Organized. There was that word again. I closed the papers carefully and handed them back without signing. Claire's smile faded just enough for me to notice. I think I should review everything with an attorney first, I replied calmly. The room went still between us. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just still. Claire accepted the papers slowly. Margaret, I really do not think involving lawyers will help anyone heal. Heal. Every sentence she spoke sounded polished enough to belong inside a therapy brochure. I looked directly at her for the first time all evening. Ethan already involved lawyers before he died. The color drained slightly from her face. Only slightly, but enough. Behind us, laughter floated down the hallway from the living room where guests continued drinking wine beneath Ethan's family photographs. Claire recovered quickly and forced another small smile. You are confused right now, she said gently. Grief can make people suspicious. I nodded once. Maybe. Then I stepped past her and walked toward the front hallway. My suitcases still waited beside the door exactly where she left them. I reached down slowly and lifted one handle. Claire followed behind me immediately. What are you doing? She asked carefully. I looked at the suitcase for a moment before answering. Taking my things upstairs. Her composure cracked then. Barely. But enough for me to finally see the woman Ethan must have been seeing during those final months. I do not think that is appropriate anymore, she replied quietly. Actually, I said, Daniel Reeves disagrees. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything spoken all night. Claire's expression froze completely. In the living room, someone laughed loudly at a joke near the fireplace while holiday music drifted softly through the speakers. But inside the hallway, everything had changed. You spoke to Daniel, she asked carefully. Today. Her fingers tightened around the relocation papers. I noticed the slight tremor she tried to hide. For the first time since Ethan died, Claire looked uncertain. Truly uncertain. Then another voice suddenly entered the hallway behind us. Margaret. I turned to see Olivia standing near the front entrance wearing her nursing scrubs beneath a winter coat. Ethan's daughter looked exhausted from her hospital shift, but the moment she saw me beside the suitcases, confusion crossed her face. Why are your bags downstairs? She asked. Claire answered immediately. Your grandmother thought staying with friends for a while might help emotionally. Olivia frowned. Grandma never said that. Claire opened her mouth again, but Olivia was already walking toward me. She hugged me tightly for the first time since the funeral. Her voice lowered near my ear. Dad left me something too, she whispered. My heart stopped. Olivia slipped a folded note into my hand while Claire watched us from across the hallway. Then Olivia quietly added 6 words that changed everything. He knew this would happen, Grandma.